Okay, we are live. Hi everyone, welcome to the community call. In this call, we'll be talking about a MIP that was published last week by Joaquin. The MIP is suggesting changes to the MIP process itself, which we'll walk you through throughout this call. Feel free to use the chat to ask any questions or share comments, and we'll share a link to the Mina research forum post as well, so you can add your feedback there. Joaquin, I'll hand over to you and you can talk us through the agenda for today.
Great. Thank you so much, Becky. And hello, everyone. I'm very excited for this today because we have a very interesting agenda. First of all, we want to give you a quick summary, a quick overview on the proposal in general. And then we're going to take a closer look at some of the key aspects of this proposal, the risk assessment and how it could affect voting thresholds, the new roles, MIP facilitators and MIP reviewer roles, and their frameworks, and the plan for bootstrapping these new processes, and a possibility of having random assignment for MIP reviewers. So finally, we are going to have some time to address comments from the community. And we can get started with this quick overview. Let me see. So first of all, MIP or Mina Improvement Proposal is our main mechanism to make decisions collectively as a community without central authorities. So it's very important for shaping the future of Mina. And in my opinion, it needs an upgrade. It needs an update because as the community and the ecosystem grows, there's also a growing need for updating our governance processes and decision-making. In addition to that, we want to help realize a future powered by participants. So this MIP upgrade is a collection of some few adjustments, some few improvements that we wanted to propose. There could be more in the future, but for now, I think these are the ones that we are going to need for the current situation. No? With the objective to increase community participation, because having low participation is a risk for all governance systems, but especially for those that vote with stake. No? So the changes that we are proposing initially are increasing the scope of the MIP process, so we can not only have decisions on core protocol changes, but also on Mina economics and governance. We are also proposing to introduce some new roles, basically the MIP facilitator, to assist MIP authors and guide them through the process, and MIP reviewers to review the content of the MIP and provide a risk assessment for the benefit of the broader community. We are also proposing to introduce some mass deliberation tools and open debates so we can make the deliberation more engaging and open new avenues for community participation. And last but not least, some clear guidelines for MIP implementation to give some structure to this part of the process. So in terms of next steps, our plan is to focus right now on collecting and gathering all the feedback that we can from the community. For that, you can follow this link that will take you to our survey in Discord. It's very easy to use, so that you can give us feedback and we can incorporate that feedback into the draft. The plan will be to formalize this MIP in November so that we can start the review phase with the MIP editors group, so that we can have an on-chain vote by early December. But these are tentative dates, so a lot of things can happen in each one of these phases. So we will see, and we will keep you updated. There's also the possibility of having new MIPs in the future that could complement these changes or extend them or introduce new changes into the process. So this is like a quick overview of the proposal, the motivation behind it, and what are the next steps, the plans for the future of this proposal. And I want to invite the other collaborators, Ben and Evan, to give us some initial thoughts in general about the proposal. Maybe Ben, you want to start?
I mean, I think at a high level, making sure, thinking about as the ecosystem grows, that this decision-making process can remain responsive to growing and to new needs and wants from the community. I think that's really important and part of the motivation here. We talk in our Next Steps blog post about the importance of effective and aligned governance, and within that, responsiveness is a really important attribute. And so I think thinking about how we can have something that can grow in the right way and be flexible are really important principles and values for these suggestions.
Great, thank you, Ben. And Evan, do you have any initial thoughts about the proposal in general? High level. I can't hear Evan.
Oh, cool.
There you are.
Am I here now? I think I was in
Yes.
the top stage. Okay, cool. Yeah, like, I mean, I think when, we had the initial version of MIPs, it like solved the main kind of challenge that we had to solve at the time, which is having some way for having a discussion, a process, and a vote around changes. But, we're in a phase now where there's probably going to be a lot more changes suggested to Mina. Like, I think folks probably saw like the tokenomics one recently coming through, for example, that would eventually be an MIP, as well as other changes to Mina. There's, a Rust node in development that will have to get factored in. There's possible future ZK apps changes. There are possible additions of things like automated hard forks. There's all these different changes that need to come through. And that's great, but we need some process for actually doing that in a way that makes sense. And if you look at the current process right now, it has like kind of the basic structure for doing that, but it's missing some things that seem really useful if we're going to do that. Namely, I think the two things it's missing is some process by which there is some baseline level of expertise and reasoning and deliberation happening about proposals that come forward. And that's like one thing we need to add to this process for it to be improved, as well as just generally more ways of collecting feedback and engaging more people when making these kinds of decisions. So I think it's really important we do this kind of upgrade so that we can ensure that there is lots of attention, deliberation, review put into these decisions as they come up. And also set us up to be able to make good decisions when we vote on what these changes come through for the protocol. So I think we need to have an upgrade like this, and it should help set us up for the many MIPs that will come through in the future for Mina. Yeah.
Yeah, fully agree. With all that's coming, it's very important to have an structured process and to have it updated and prepared for what is coming. Okay, any additional thoughts on this quick overview, or should we take a
Joaquin, I was
closer look?
maybe going to just add to that, just thinking about the document that you shared, maybe just worth reminding ourselves and in the discussion there about the motivation and the rationale. I think it's important that there's some high-level principles just to remind ourselves about what gets suggested as the desired properties for MIP decision-making. It mentions there about informed and engaged so that community members, especially non-experts, can understand potential risks and benefits, promoting a high level of participation of the community in deliberation and debates. The second principle of something that's scalable, so thinking about how we can have a process that can grow, can scale with increased number of MIPs, and of course, principles of decentralization, ensuring there's a path for all dependencies to be managed on chain. So as we go through those, it'd be worth keeping those values and principles in mind.
Totally. Thank you, Ben. Okay, let's see. In the draft, and you will see some open community questions that we want feedback from the community, because there are different options that we are considering, and here today, we want to take a closer look at these questions. What are the different options? And what are the pros and cons of each one of them, right? So the first one is, I'd say, the most important question of them all. And I'm going to read it, and then I will give you some context. The question is, should the risk assessment affect decision-making thresholds, such as requiring higher participation for high-risk MIPs, while allowing low-risk MIPs to pass with lower turnout? And if so, what should be these decision-making thresholds and parameters for low-risk and high-risk MIPs? So this question is crucial. It's very important because we are talking here about the risk assessment. To give you some context, we are proposing to create a pool of experts for each MIP category: engineering, economics, and governance. And these experts will provide feedback to the MIP author to refine the proposal, and they will also publish a risk assessment. This will include a summary of the risks, benefits, and trade-offs of the proposed changes, and they will make an assessment on the risk of these proposed changes. So far, I think we all agree that it's very beneficial to have this risk assessment for the community, no? Because we can have a better understanding of the proposed changes and how they will affect Mina development. But the question here is, should this risk assessment be only informative and only give us information, or should the risk assessment affect decision-making thresholds, right? This way, we could reduce the risk of dangerous proposals passing with low turnout. But on the other hand, if we give too much power to the MIP reviewers, we could be concentrating too much decision-making power in the hands of a small group of experts. So I think the key here is balancing these two risks. I think this is more or less the context and the purpose behind this question. And here we are giving an example of how this could work. It's only an example, but we could use the principles of efficiency for low-risk MIPs. So this kind of MIPs should be able to proceed without requiring high turnout or consuming excessive amount of people's time. Effectively, this kind of MIPs could be approved by a majority vote, even if there is a low level of participation. And we could use a principle of conservatism for high-risk MIPs so that we make it harder for them to pass with low turnout. So this could be approved by a majority vote, but provided there is a much higher participation. And for example, we are talking here an example of 40% of minimum participation. So this is just to start the conversation. We want the community to give us their thoughts on the different options. And I wanted to ask you guys if you have any comments, any ideas on these two options. There could be other options that we may have missed, and what are the pros and cons of each option? Shall we start with Evan this time? Sorry, can't hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like this is really a question up for the community. It's how much kind of default threshold does the community want to delegate to reviewers? Because if you all want to set the threshold to 0, I think like people have to like be really paying attention. If something high risk comes out, it doesn't get accidentally passed with a low turnout. At the same time, if we set the threshold higher, I think there's like a trade-off there that it'll require more participation to get things through if reviewers say something is high risk, but the community doesn't necessarily agree with that or wants to pass it anyway. For me personally, I think it should be set to some number, not maybe as high as 50%, but a little lower, maybe depending on how many of the reviewers said it's high risk. If it's all 5, maybe it should be really high, like 50%. But if it's like 1 reviewer, maybe it should be a little lower. But I think this should be, I'm curious what people in the community think. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it and where I'm thinking it should be set. But ultimately, this is a question for how we want to think about it as a community for voting on MIPs. Yep.
Exactly. And we encourage all community members to fill the survey and give us feedback, or you can just give us a comment in Mina Research. Ben, what are your thoughts about this question?
Well, before we get stuck into details of thresholds, again, let's come up to the big picture here. So what we're suggesting, and coming back to those key principles in your document, especially if people watching haven't had a chance yet to read the document, we're thinking about creating a more structured process for expertise to be brought to bear on proposals, and then for that expertise to be shared with the community. Now, of course, when a MIP gets drafted, community members can leave their comments directly on GitHub, as is the case at the moment. We're just suggesting that on top of that, having something more structured. And in the document, it talks about whether this group, the group can review each MIP and present, a high-level summary of risks, benefits, and trade-offs. And sharing that summary could then boost the capacity of the community, especially non-experts, to really understand the proposal, so that they can be better informed when it comes to the opportunity to vote whether to accept or not a proposal. So that's part of the big picture here. And so how can we bring expertise in a more structured kind of way? And then what's the best way is to share that expert view, especially with the non-experts. That's what we've been considering. But then, of course, at the moment, the proposal is something that's descriptive. And this question is asking whether there should be something more prescriptive, because, of course, there could be a case where if something is considered, higher risk than a particular other proposal, then should we really be treating those risk assessments the same, or should there be some kind of change or impact, which, if something is higher risk, should be more brought to bear? Conversely, if something's of a lower risk, as the slide suggests, could that be introducing some kind of inefficiency into the process? Could be running more efficiently or smoothly if something is considered a low risk to the long-term health of the protocol, that it should be considered in a different kind of way. So yeah, that's kind of a summary of our, I guess, different ways of thinking about something. But whether it's descriptive like this or prescriptive, the big picture here is about trying to get expertise and best way to communicate it more widely.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, again, we are curious to know what others in the community think about this. So let us know in the comments, in the survey. And let's continue with the second question. The second question would be, would you consider becoming a MIP facilitator or a MIP reviewer? And if so, what suitable expertise do you have to fulfill either of these roles? So to give you some context, the roles that we are speaking of are MIP facilitators. These are elected members of the community who have a deep understanding of MIP protocols governance and processes, so that they can assist MIP authors and guide them through the process. So they are responsible for managing the MIP process and ensuring a smooth progression of MIPs through the process. While MIP reviewers are elected community members who have expertise, knowledge and expertise in a specific area, in a specific category. So they can provide feedback and a comprehensive risk assessment. And with this question, we want to identify if there is any interest from the community to play either of these roles, and what should be the required knowledge and expertise to effectively take on these responsibilities. So what are your thoughts on these new roles, and what do you think should be required to effectively play one of these roles? We can start with Ben this time.
Well, of course, in our current MIP process, there are groups of MIP editors who, I guess, like a midwife, try and make sure that the MIP process is followed correctly as MIPs get passed through it. So, in the current document, those responsibilities, for example, or most of those responsibilities will be passed over to MIP facilitators to ensure that authors understand the process and all the steps are followed correctly. On the MIP reviewer, also worth reminding people about the proposal this is sitting on, which is about extending the categories. Currently, MIP's focused just on major technical changes, and we're talking about introducing 2 new categories, one of governance, about proposals about changes to governance, and proposals that would make economic changes. So that, although that would provide both, those provide flexibility and again allow the system to be more responsive, we are aware about what the current expertise in those 3 areas is, and then how over time those expertise in engineering, in governance and economics can be grown organically or otherwise to make sure we've got the right kind of people to review them.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Evan?
Yeah, one way I was thinking about this is, you know, if everyone had all the time in the world, everyone could do a ton of research in every proposal, but part of that research probably would be reaching out to experts that have subject matter expertise in the area of the proposal, understanding what they think. So I view this as a way of making sure that's happening. So it should be people that, by them sharing their perspective on the proposal, can provide a lot of efficiency to the broader community because they get this baseline perspective on what the proposal impact could be for the protocol, but both on the, you know, the benefit side and on the risk side. And I think that I believe we talk about 3 different roles in the current proposal. We talk about engineering, economics, and governance. And in each of those, there is expertise that's really useful to have when evaluating proposals, either proposals to change in processes, proposals to modify the economics of a system, or proposals to create engineering changes that impact developers and then users. So for all those, I think we should have like very like kind of subject area, you know, expertise written out for them. As well as for them, I think there's also like a role of, you know, there is some kind of neutrality, I think, that comes in with being in one of these positions. You're lending your expertise to the system. You're sharing the trade-offs, the pros, the cons. I think it's important that people who are in these positions, you know, kind of, you know, at least when they're in this role, honor that perspective about providing that unbiased, you know, it can be biased in terms of the trade-offs they're recognizing, but in terms of like really laying them out, I think is important. The other thing I think is like there is like a lot of things behind the scenes, at least now. Maybe in the future it can be more and more automated that need to happen. So folks that have a good understanding of how to run those kinds of processes, it can be on top of, you know, messaging people to give their responses, to posting things on channels when there are updates. I think is really valuable. So facilitators also being something that's important and needs people that are good at and understand how to run those processes.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, guys. So yeah, we have quickly mentioned that both of these roles should require their own processes, their own differences. But there's also some common guiding principles that we have included in our proposal. The question here is, what do you think should be the key common principles for the MIP facilitators and MIP reviewer frameworks, right? There could be others that we may have missed, or the intention here is to check alignment and to check that we are in agreement with these common principles for both of the frameworks. To give you a quick summary, we think that any community member should be able to present and propose themselves as candidates for either of these roles, MIP facilitator or MIP reviewers, by just submitting a new MIP and following the MIP process. And at the same time, it should be possible for any community member to propose the removal of any MIP facilitator or MIP reviewer to keep them in check and hold them accountable. And the way to do this will be the same: submit a new MIP and follow the process. This way, any community member will be available or will be able to vote to approve or reject the selection or the removal of any MIP facilitator and MIP reviewer. And finally, we are saying that as the community builds its capacity to effectively take on these responsibilities, key ecosystem players will collaborate to fulfill these roles while we test them, while we refine them. So these are the common principles that will guide us in the future of these roles for the MIP process. But the question is this: are there other possible principles that we may have missed, and are we in agreement with these ones? And we can start with Evan this time.
Yeah, can you repeat the question briefly? Just like,
Yeah, what do you think should be the common principles for these two frameworks? These are the ones that we have in the proposal. Are we in agreement with this one? Are there
I think
any
so.
other?
Yeah, I don't know if I have much to add. Like, I think that, like, yeah, this already, like, I think easier to me. I mentioned some other ones briefly before that I think should also be a key part of it. But yeah, I think it's like basically super important that ultimately these roles are beholden to the community at large. So I think we need to make sure that's part of it, and I think this does that. But I'm also really curious people's input on this part of it as well.
Perfect. Ben?
Or maybe just to add and flesh out some of that. So, I mean, ultimately, so with the creation of these two groups, which would be influential, we of course want to root that influence in the authority of the community. So ultimately, you know, their power is being authorized by the community through community decision makings. But also want to be thinking about principles of transparency and accountability. So how can MIP facilitator and MIP reviewer discussions and decisions be made transparent to the community so they can be held to account? You know, what kinds of forms could those take when they come together? How can those things then be shared, whether there's summaries of meetings or recordings, whatever there might be? What are the kind of decision-making criteria too that the community would like to, who thinks is important to help shape their decision-making? So I think those, yeah, we'd welcome views from the community about specific ideas about ensuring that transparency and accountability.
Exactly. Very important. Thank you, guys. Let's see. The next question is related to this one as well. Given the limited current capacity, do you agree with these proposals to initially bootstrap the process? And we're talking here about how to fill these roles while the community builds their capacity and their knowledge to effectively take on these responsibilities. No? So in the proposal, we are saying that Mina Foundation, in collaboration with other members of the ecosystem, will temporarily fill these new roles as needed, and for the process to be tested and refined while the community builds their knowledge and expertise. And our objective is to finish and complete this bootstrapping period in less than a year, in 12 months. So what do you think about this plan for bootstrapping the process? I think it allows us as a community to test and refine these roles while we give enough time for the community to build that capacity and that expertise at their own pace. But curious to know what you guys think and others in the community. Ben, we can start with you.
Sure thing. Well, in the document that you shared, of course, in the start, in the motivation and the rationale, we are very sensitive to, well, these ambitious and exciting plans also depend on having the right expertise at the right time. And so we're very sensitive to that and thinking about, well, how can we make these changes and get the process going, given where expertise is at the moment? And I think, this then relates back to two previous questions. So we're curious about community members who might respond to a previous question and come forward and think they've got the right kind of suitability and expertise to be a facilitator or reviewer. So we'd be very curious to see what initial responses we would get, and also responses to what these frameworks for being a facilitator and being a reviewer, what they look like and what they contain. Because if they've got the right kind of principles guiding these roles, and the community feels confident about that, well, that'll build confidence in this too. So we'd really welcome views from the community about, well, their views on how these roles could take shape, what they could look like, and what should be guiding them. And please do come forwards if you are interested in these roles and you think you can demonstrate the right kind of expertise. I'd love to hear from you.
Sure thing. Yes.
I'll say my take. Okay, so yes. So I think, like, for one, as we're implementing all these processes, we're entering like a new phase of the project where there's going to be collaboration between individuals, between organizations, between people. And I think, to me, like, the definition of community changes. I don't know if this is like controversial, but to include all the existing teams I'm building on Mina, I think community is like kind of all of us, including O1 Foundation and others, where, you know, I think we don't want to be in some kind of privileged position. We want to just be contributors to the project. And so from that perspective, I think our goal should just be to have participants from like as wide numbers of organizations as possible. Maybe at first that is O1 and Mina Foundation, and I'd actually be really curious if people see that as like a centralization risk in some way that we shouldn't actually do. But ideally, I think we want kind of a broad set of folks from across the ecosystem. I could imagine for governance and economics that to be like something that we probably maybe do and would be great to have more folks from across the ecosystem. For engineering, a lot of the core development has taken place within just a few companies, but I think that there are more groups doing things with core protocol. I know like Zeco, for example, is doing things that are like core protocol adjacent, for example. And I think we should just try to have as many organizations as possible. But in my view, it's okay to have primarily Foundation and O1 initially, as long as the community, you know, thinks it's okay. Like, we want people to say no if they don't want that. And that there is sufficient accountability over them through these other mechanisms of adding other reviewers, removing reviewers, etc., if necessary. Because the goal is eventually want something super decentralized, something that is like direct from the community, but still brings us expertise in. And you know, there's some things to solve for as we do that. I'm supportive of this, but I'm really curious if people think about it too, because ultimately that's what we should probably actually do for it.
Yeah, fully agree.
Can I add just one further comment on that?
Sure.
Again, the document states at the very outset how when we published that Next Steps blog post many months ago now, setting out a vision for governance, I mean, one core theme about it was taking an experimental and incremental approach, that as we want to develop governance processes with the community, how we can do this in a way based on learning from real world testing and making improvements along the way. So I think another principle driving what we're suggesting here about this initial bootstrap is part of that. Given there are many changes in this proposal, how we can implement them in a gradual, incremental way. And then as we go along, we can continue to make more and more changes.
Yeah, totally correct. And we are curious to know from the community if there are any other options that we could consider. So yeah, let us know. Let's see the last question, which is also an important one. The question goes like this: rather than reaching out to the pool of experts and asking all of them to review the MIP, should a subgroup of reviewers be randomly assigned instead? So currently in the proposal, we are proposing to create a pool of experts for each category: engineering, economics, and governance, and the MIP author will send a request for comments to all the reviewers in the relevant category. But there is another option. When we have enough experts in a pool, we could randomly assign a subgroup of 5 reviewers at least to review the MIP. This could diversify the perspectives brought to the evaluation process and minimizing the biases that may arise from relying on the same experts repeatedly. But on the other hand, it's also crucial to make sure that the ones that are assigned have the right necessary expertise, and we are not leaving someone out of this subgroup that should be there because they have more specific expertise on a corresponding area. So I think one way to mitigate this problem or this risk will be allowing reviewers to consult with additional experts, and this could enhance the depth of the assessment without over-centralizing decision-making. So what are your thoughts about these two options? No? Having random assignment versus not having random assignment, or just letting all the reviewers to participate in the review? Yeah, what do you think about these options? I think this time we're going to start with Evan.
So I think it might not matter for a little bit if we have like, I suspect we'll have like, you know, around 5 for each of these categories initially. So it won't be immediately something we have to like actually have a decision on, because if there's only 5 per thing and we're choosing 5, it's either way. I think though, the question is, this would be nice, I think, when we have a higher volume of MIPs coming through. If, for example, there are 3 or 4 MIPs out at a time on engineering, having 5 people look at those all at the same, you know, be assigned 4 different MIPs to evaluate, it might be a pretty big workload. Whereas if we had 20 different people that at that time were capable of being reviewers, it might be less burdensome on them if we're randomly assigning it. I think there is still a question of expertise though, and I think that one of the roles of these MIP reviewers has to be like, if you're one of these 20 folks and you're given something that you're realizing there's someone else who is like more capable, whether they're an MIP reviewer or not, you should be reaching out to them and you should be getting their take on the issue. So as an expert, you should be capable of doing the review, but that's, you know, of course, with potential support from other people also. I think as I imagine there being more and more simultaneous MIPs and more reviewers, I'm like increasingly in favor of random assignment. But I think actually this like isn't going to make too much of a difference initially, but it's nice to bake in initially. Just to have one more comment on that, kind of like maybe like why it's interesting in some level, is kind of going back to some of the inspiration for this, which was looking at citizen assemblies, where if you have a large group of people and you want to have an efficient way of figuring out you know, them deliberating on something, you can randomly sample a subset of them in order to do that deliberation. So I think there is some potential like efficiency to be made there, as well as like ensuring that there's some fairness in terms of like this pool of people that have been marked as potential reviewers being assigned to MIPs in a way that's unbiased. I think there are some benefits there. So I would be in support of doing it now, but I think it's fine for later too. Again, curious what community thinks on this one, if there's other trade-offs to doing it now versus later versus something else maybe later too.
Perfect, thank you. And Ben, I'm sure you also have some ideas, some thoughts about this topic.
Or maybe just 2 or 3 very quick points there. So from what Evan was saying there, I think that, well, I think the top level one is about capacity and expertise, where we are at the moment, where we want to get to. And of course, initially, how large will this pool of experts be? And then 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, how large could it become? And I think that would, you know, affect this. I think that once someone is part of that pool of experts, I think this idea of fairness. So you don't have the situation where there's the same people reviewing, where other potential viewers can't do that. That wouldn't be fair. And at the same time, this slide mentions the word perspective, and in our blog posts about collective intelligence, it emphasizes their point about the importance of cognitive diversity. So this would be another way to ensure that we could get a diversity of views, which is to the greater good and the greater benefit. And maybe just a final point is, it'd be great for the community to think about whether and provide feedback, whether through this or other means, which is about how to signal expertise across the community. Because sure, a group of 5 people could come together and review a MIP, but maybe there's wider expertise. I don't know, maybe there's some security assessment or some kind of audit, and how could that wider expertise be signaled to the community so they can point out to wider people that MIP authors can go to, or can bring, in their decision, in their considerations and assessment, they might need this niche expertise or some other expertise to become and brought to bear. So yeah, how can expertise across the community be communicated so it can be brought in at the right time by the right people?
Great, thank you so much, guys. I think we can spend the rest of the time addressing questions from the community. Here is again the list of questions that we have seen today, and I invite everybody to give us feedback, give us your thoughts on all of these important topics. So shall we read some of the questions that we have in the chat? Let me see.
I'm really curious also, like, is there a way we get like kind of a sentiment check on some of these from people in the community? Like, maybe this is like kind of an experiment. For question 1, could people just like post in the chat, like, scale like 1 to 5, like 5 is like, let's definitely add some kind of thresholds, 1 like, let's not add any thresholds, 3 if you don't have a strong opinion.
Yes.
I don't know.
Let's
This
see if
experiment.
we can get some more responses. Yeah. In the meantime, let's see. We had a question about the tokenomics MIP. I don't know the timelines. I'm not working closely with that team, no, but I'm curious. I'm interested, like the rest of the community, no. And from my perspective, I think they are in the early phases of the process. No, they are starting a conversation. They could write a post on Mina research to get more feedback. So I think that's the point they are right now. But I don't know of any target dates or any timelines. We can see some numbers here. We have 2, 1. To the first question.
It seems like generally against thresholds then, right? Like,
it seems like it.
Yeah. From this very limited pool.
Perfect. Again, you can also use the survey bot in Discord, so we can collect all the responses there, and the bot will summarize the responses in a private way, right? So your name will not be disclosed. I see more questions here. Is there some way to on-ramp people who would be interested in fulfilling the roles of MIP facilitators and MIP reviewers? For people who don't have the required expertise but would like to learn something that is step by step. And I think this is a brilliant idea and something that we should work on together as a community to create comprehensive documentation for the community to build that expertise, that knowledge, and that will eventually allow them to play one of these roles effectively. Any other comments on these questions? Okay. Should we do the same with another question? Can we ask the chat to give us a number from 1 to 5, how much they agree about maybe the last one, no? The option to randomly assign MIP reviewers. So from 1, I'm totally against, to 5, totally in favor of this random assignment. Please let us know. And let's see if there are other questions. Okay, I see a 4, 5. So for the moment, we can see general agreement with this random assignment. Yeah. Okay, thank you, guys.
I think there was a question farther up on when will the lock Mina MIP begin to vote, which I'm taking to mean like the tokenomics MIP that part of the proposal is locking. There's going to be a post to Mina research, I believe later today, or I believe as soon as later today, that will overview the proposal, in addition to the YouTube video which has been posted, which I definitely recommend watching. There will then be like a discussion period, followed by a formal MIP being created with specific parameters being proposed for, like, you know, the actual mechanisms that ends up being agreed upon. And then there will be like a formal vote on that MIP. I think we're targeting, I want to say before end of the year, but potentially sooner, depending how those other steps go. But the main goal right now is post that to Mina research, get feedback on it, towards a formal MIP being created.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm very interested in seeing how that develops. I see a suggestion here, no, that the last question should be done in 2 parts, no? The first part should a smaller group, subgroup of experts, to give us feedback, yeah? Should we create a subgroup of experts to review MIPS and give us feedback? And then the second part of the question will be, should that group be randomly assigned, or is there any other mechanism that we can use? No? Thank you for that suggestion. Okay, so I think we have reached the end of the time that we had for this community call. Just quickly remind the next steps. So we are currently focused on getting feedback. So use the link to the survey in Discord, or leave us a comment in Mina Research. You can also reach out directly to any of us, and we will be happy to chat with you. The next step will be to formalize this MIP and submit it to the GitHub repository and start the review with the MIP editor group. We are planning to do this around November, so that we could have an on-chain vote by early December. So that's the current plan. Again, tentative dates. Take it with a grain of salt, and we will keep you updated. So that's it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for the collaborators to share their thoughts and opinions on these key aspects of the proposal. And we will be in touch, and we want to schedule more community calls to keep deep diving in this proposal in the coming weeks. So thank you so much, everybody.